Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Good Erev Shabbos. Part of the idea that Kabbalah introduces, excuse me, that Kabbalah introduces into Jewish life is that when we see things in nature, that reflects how things exist in the spiritual world as well. And therefore, a close observation of nature automatically brings us to an understanding or appreciation of the spiritual world as well. All of us take nature for granted because that's natural, just the way we are. And therefore, we don't invest much of our mental capacity into its observation. And even those that are professional students of nature, biologists, naturalists, geologists, all of those people have a very narrow focus, and therefore they never really get past the natural occurrence to make a connection with the spiritual world. Just one example, and then we'll see how this plays out in this week's Parsha. One of the letters, Kaviyachol, of the Ribono Shel Olam is Shin. It's a three-pronged letter that has three branches to it. It's a letter that we use on our mezuzot. So the Meforshim explain, again, Kabbalistically, so to speak, because there's a whole entire system or a Torah of letters, just the letters of the Hebrew alphabet, what they teach us. We're not accustomed to deal with that. There's a book by Rabbi Munk, Eli Munk from Paris, Zechrono Livracha, on letters, the Hebrew alphabet. But the letters mean something. And that's why they have to be written in a certain way and with a certain perfection. So the letter Shin has three branches to it that form the letter. So the Balei Kabbalah say that we find that in nature, there is a three-pronged source to holiness. So, for instance, the River Yarden, which is not the Volga or the Mississippi or the Zambezi, and a certain relative comparison, the River Yarden is a trickle. It's easily fordable in a few places. We find that in the Chumash, Mavra Yarden, that there were fords over the River Jordan where you could cross. The water only came up to your knees or your waist. Yet the Yarden has a holiness to it. We see that from the story of Naaman, the general of Aram, who was afflicted with a type of tsaras, a skin disease that no one could cure. And he came to the Novi Elisha, and Elisha told him to go bathe in the Yarden. And he mocked him. He said, the Yarden, he said, we have the Euphrates, the Tigris, great rivers in Aram, and you tell me to go bathe in this puny pool of water. Nevertheless, when all else didn't work, he went and he bathed in the Yarden and he was cured. And according to the Medrash, even it's intimated in Tanakh itself, he became a convert, he became a monotheist. He gave up idolatry. So the Yarden has powers. According to the sheet of the Rogatchover Gaon, the Yarden has separate halachas. There are halachas that apply east of the Yarden. There are halachot that apply west of the Yarden, and there are halachot that apply in the Yarden, as regarding the holiness of Eretz Yisrael, Shemitah, etc. So the Yarden has three sources where it draws its water from. Three rivers. They're very small rivers. In the summer, they are almost just drops. And when the Hermon melts, then these rivers acquire water. So you have the Banyas and the Chatzbani and the Dan. Those are the three rivers that form the headwaters of the Yarden. And they say that's the letter Shin. If you look at the map, it's a Shin. And that is the source of the holiness of the river Yarden, is that it comes from three rivers that converge and form the letter Shin, which is one of the letters, Kaviyachol, that represents the Shekhinah, that represents spirituality. So let's apply this idea. You know, when you have 10 days to think about a shiur that you're going to give. So, you know, there's a lot of dross that has to be drained first. This week's Parsha. Parsha begins, Re'ei Anochi. Nosein lifneichem hayom bracha kolah. So the verb that is employed is Re'ei. Re'ei means to see. In English, we have a phrase, seeing is believing. Things that we see, we accept as being true. We have the halacha by edus, by witnesses. So hearsay evidence is not admissible. The fact that you told me what happened, I may trust you 100%, but I didn't see it. And if I didn't see it, I cannot testify to its occurrence. Aid me aid is possible. So the Torah says, Ray. So the Meforshim say there are three sources to, so to speak, religion, belief, faith, whatever words we want to use. One is intellectual. I figured it out myself. Now, we'll discuss this more at length in a minute, but that is not common. People don't invest the necessary mental capacity to figure out the greatness of God and the mission of Israel on their own. But that's one source of faith. So the Rambam calls that das, and we find that in the Chumash. L'man das kol amei oretz ki Hashem hu Elokim ein od milvado. The world is supposed to figure it out by itself. The Rambam says the mitzvah saseh, the basic mitzvah that governs our lives, is das, is intellect to use our brains to figure it out, to make God real in our lives. And when we find that, the Novi says, Umol ha'oretz deyo es Hashem, kamayim layom mechasim. There'll come a time that the earth will be filled with das, with the knowledge of God. We'll know it. There's a second type of source, so to speak, and that's what my parents taught me, my teachers taught me, what, so to speak, history teaches me. I didn't see it. I did not discover it myself, but I believe that my teachers didn't tell me falsehoods. I trust in the honesty of others. I trust in the wisdom of my parents, grandparents. So that's a second source of faith and belief. Faith and belief built upon the tradition of others, built upon the fact that people who are near and dear to me, or situations that occurred in life, are sufficient to implant within me the understanding of godliness and spirituality. The third area, which is this week's Parsha, is that I don't believe what anybody tells me. And intellectually, I cannot prove anything. For every proof that I will advance, someone else will advance a completely opposite and logical proof. But I saw it happen. I was there and I saw it happen. And to me, that becomes undeniable. I saw it. I don't know why it happened, and I cannot explain it, and I cannot intellectualize it, but I saw it happen. And that is the third leg, so to speak, of belief. Something that I saw, something that I accepted because others that are holy to me taught me, or something because of the fact intellectually, mentally, I was able to construct it myself. So that's the shin of faith. Now you'll notice on Tfilin, the Tfilin Shel Rosh, so there's a shin that has 3, and there's a shin that has 4, on different sides of the box. So the Meforshim say, what is the 4th leg, which is not usual with a shin. And when you write a shin, you shouldn't put the 4th one there. But if you don't put the 4th one there and fill the Parsha. So the Gemara says that's halacha l'Moshe Sinai. That's halacha l'Moshe Sinai is revelation. On Sinai, Moshe saw a pair of tefillin and they were told this is the God to make tefillin. So that's how tefillin have to look. So it's not because I understand why, and not because anybody taught me why, and not because intellectually I can figure out why. It's just why. That's why. It's revelation. Revelation is the highest of all attributes that a person can acquire. Hokom b'Yisrael k'Moshe Od, because Moshe is ponim al ponim. Moshe is revelation. So there are no questions on Moshe because it's a different relationship completely. So the Torah this week emphasizes Re'eh. See, the Torah is not satisfied that we should Laman das kol hame'oretz, that we should somehow intellectually be able to achieve it, even though that's a goal that we strive for. And as I mentioned, the Rambam holds that to be the basic mitzvah. The Gemara has a discussion. What is the basic faith of the Jewish people? So one opinion is Tzadik b'emunah so yichye. Emunah, faith, trust, almost blind faith. The second opinion in the Talmud is das, not faith, but knowledge, intellectual greatness. You're being able to achieve it mentally on its own. And the Rambam follows this second opinion, even though most of the Jewish people are only aware of the first opinion, that it's Tzadik b'emunah so yichye. The Torah wants us to come to a level of Re'eh, that I saw it. So you'll see that in Chumash Dvorim, Moshe says, "Pen tishrach es advorim asher ro'u einecha." Don't forget what you saw. Now Moshe is talking to a generation that saw it. We can only talk to a generation that has been taught it, that has it as a basis of tradition, that knows it because others have told us about it. But they saw it. And therefore Moshe warns them, don't forget what you saw. I remember that my father of blessed memory, his yard site was not long ago, was a rabbi in Chicago in a shul 20 some years on the old west side of Chicago, the Jewish neighborhood. And at the end of the 1940s, beginning of the 1950s, that neighborhood was inundated by immigrants from the south of the United States. And the Jewish population fled. That was not only in Chicago, that was, I think, common in all urban cities. And the old neighborhood had 42 Orthodox synagogues. 42. Magnificent buildings. The Rosh Shul could hold a few thousand people. And all of that disappeared like in 3-4 years. And the neighborhood today is a wasteland. But synagogues attempted to relocate. So my father's synagogue attempted to relocate to a different neighborhood and unite with a small existing synagogue there. And the synagogue would unite, and my father would be the rabbi. But they came to my father and gave him this proposition, but it was conditional on the fact that it would no longer have separate seating, because that was at that time, that was the political correctness of the time. And my father refused. And friends of my father came to talk to him, I remember. And we had no independent source of income. And they told him, it's not such a big deal. Retain the Orthodox siddur, may you'll have an influence. And I remember my father's answer, which at the time struck me as a strange answer. He said, I saw personally Rabbi Shimon Shkop, who was the Rosh Yeshiva in Grodno, and later in the Yeshiva Rabbeinu Yitzchak Hanan. He was the dean of the Rosh Yeshiva in Lithuania. He was a man of enormous handsomeness, tall, aristocratic. And my father said, I saw Reb Shimon, I cannot do it. He didn't argue the point. He just said, I saw Reb Shimon, how can I do this? Chazal say the famous story of Yosef, when he is tempted by the wife of Potiphar, he sees his father's face. No, his father is not there. His father is hundreds of kilometers away. But for an instant, he sees his father's face. And he desists. He cannot do it. So that's the idea of Ray. The idea of Ray is that you saw it. Something that you saw is undeniable. You're not able to ignore it. You're not able to say it didn't happen. And therefore you were bound. And that's why the Torah used that verb. It didn't say da. No. Even though there would be times when it does say da. And even though we say, okay, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, we always invoke our tradition. Those that went before us. But to a certain extent, that would not be sufficient. If it would not be for the fact that there was also Re'eh, to see something. And the Meforshim's darshan on the first two words, Re'eh Anochi. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, the beginning of the Aseret Advarim. Always see the Anochi. If you always see the Anochi, then it's hard to sin. Hard to be a bad person. Difficult to make the wrong choices. It's only when we forget the Anochi, when it doesn't exist within us, or when it's not so vital that we see it. It's just a concept. Well, there's a concept like this, and there's a concept like that. Chazal will say that when one has a discussion with an apikoros, so if the apikoros is Jewish, one should desist from the argument. One should not engage in the debate. The pokatvei, because it'll only make him a bigger apikoros. Because he doesn't see. He doesn't see, then there's nothing to talk about. You can describe Victoria Falls in the minutest detail, but if you weren't there and you didn't see it, you never experienced Victoria Falls. One of the truisms of life. So therefore, the Torah purposely chose these verbs in order to impress upon us that we should see. And that's what Chazal said, your eyes should always see your teachers in front of you. You should see Reb Shimon. You should see Yaakov Avinu. See who my Rebbe was. So it isn't because we believe in the supernatural that the Rebbe is going to come down to earth and give advice. That's a level that we don't ask for. But what it is that I see that I had such a Rebbe. I see him. So if I see him, then I naturally am limited in my behavior and in my response. That's why Chazal said, Asay lechorav, make for yourself a mentor. You know, you're not going to find the person who is perfect. People come to the lately a lot of phone calls from people who remember bad experiences in school. School is a terrible place, I agree. But you cannot use that as a crutch, as an excuse for life. I had a bad teacher in third grade, so get over it. It's not God's fault. And therefore, you have to make for yourself a mentor. Someone whose visage would inspire you. So we have in this week's Parsha, Moshe said, I give you a choice. Achayim v'amoves, hatov v'hara, life or death, good or evil. V'charta b'chayim, don't be an idiot. Choose life. Choose what's good for you. And don't say that, oh, it's not perfect. And therefore people choose so wrongly in life. So Re'ei Anochi, see the Anochi. See it in every way. From the headwaters of the Jordan to the smallest thing on earth. And in all respects, by following those rules, Moshe hopes, and he is certain that the eternity of the Jewish people will be preserved, and that he, so to speak, will also be remembered and immortalized. We have this time exactly that the air conditioner finishes. So I want to wish you all a good Shabbos and stay well, and we'll be in touch.
That's not a hint, Rabbi.
Huh?
That's not a hint.
You want to